All right, we're live back again for another episode, another week of SCMP MMA Live Chat and Q&A. This week we got two more Canadians. Last week I did a show, the Rod Peterson show, a show based out of Canada, a sports talk show, and props to them. Props to Alan for getting me on there and talking some MMA. But yeah, today, of course, we got a vet of the show, Spencer. Spencer's the vet. He's got his hair down and everything. He's ready to go. He's ready to go right now.
The hair will probably go up at some point because it gets annoying, but you know, we're ready for now. It's a nice day here. Gotta let it air dry today.
For sure. And then first time guy on the show, Dylan Bowker. Am I saying your last name right, Bowker?
You are, yeah.
All right, man. I'm good with that. Now, Dylan, man, just give us a little bit of background about yourself since, this is your first time. I know you're working with a couple of publications, but just break it down for us, man, what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, mostly I contribute to My MMA News, Cageside Press. I also do certain work with MMA Power Hour and whatnot. Sports Betting Dime is another outlet I do, like more boxing kind of stuff with, though. But yeah, I would say those are the primary outlets I contribute to.
MMA Power Hour, right? They're on Fight TV. Well, I know that they were bought recently by Triller, right? Or something, some kind of transaction happened.
Yep.
Did that affect your guys' show or what? What happened? Do you know anything about that?
No, nothing in any kind of way like that. Just, represents growth more than anything. And yeah, I don't know, the Triller platform, kind of an interesting one. I've been on a few of those Triller media calls as of late and putting on some interesting fights. I mean, Vitor Belfort and the real Tarzan, going to be a curious one.
Yeah, speaking of Vitor, man, I know you do a lot of coverage of One Championship. You're always on the conference calls. That's when I first started noticing you consistently. Is your questions. You're better than 99% of the people that are on those things. But not to blast anybody. But like Vitor, man, he signs with One Championship. He pretty much does nothing and then gets paid most likely, and then now he's fighting for Triller. Just give me your thoughts on like how that all happened, and did you ever talk to One Championship about Vitor? Have you talked to Vitor recently? So yeah, you should know.
Yeah, well, that was part of the Triller media call that I was referencing there. I was the first person on the call, and I was like, I got to be the guy to ask Vitor about the One situation. And yeah, basically just said they couldn't come to terms on a deal, and kind of a bummer because I was curious to see that Elaine and Galani fight. I thought that was definitely a curiosity-based kind of fight for sure. Thought it could have lent to some fireworks, but yeah, definitely a curious saga. I mean, he's signed with them for over 2 years and doesn't step into the one circle a single time.
Yeah, man, it sucked, dude. Like I always expected Vitor to just be jacked, like TRT, MRM, CRC, whatever the hell they're using nowadays. But he doesn't look like he's using anything, to be honest with you. If you look at his body, like he doesn't look like the old Vitor, like what we're used to when he was knocking out Bisping and Dan Henderson and Luke Rockhold. He looks like dad bod Vitor, man. And Spencer, what do you think of Vitor heading into boxing? I think it's a great move for him. It's better than MMA.
I mean, look, as much as I want to sit here and be like, oh my God, these boxing. If somebody wants to pay you and you can make some money like that, especially a guy like Vitor that hasn't competed in a number of years, that is, as you said, in that dad bod stage of life, but still think you're a young lion and get out there and get paid, then get after it. I mean, who am I to object to somebody getting paid?
Yeah, everybody needs to get paid. Hey, get me in a boxing ring and let me train for a little while and I'll fight you. I'll fight you for nothing. All right. Now, if you're watching this live, get in your questions. If you're watching the replay, put your comments on the bottom and we'll get to those. Make sure you hit that subscribe, the like, and all of that good stuff. So today, man, I got a few things on the list that I wanted to discuss. The first one is I think it's like one of the biggest stories in the last couple of weeks, which is Ariel Helwani leaving ESPN. Because the reason why I say that is because ESPN is like the holy grail of media. Am I wrong about that? Like ESPN is ESPN. Like when I was a kid growing up in the States, like ESPN is something I turned on every morning when I woke up. Like Sports Center is something that I watched multiple times a day
Right.
because I was like a crazy sports fan, right? And being there and MMA being there, UFC being aligned with ESPN was huge. And Ariel signing with ESPN was big. And it seemed like he signed with them like 10 years ago, but it's only been 3 years. And now his contract is up, and I guess they wanted to give him a pay cut, a certain percentage. I'm not for, this is all alleged, right? And he probably didn't want to take the pay cut, even though they said that he was making like $500,000 a year, which if we made $100,000 a year, we would not be tripping about that. But Ariel's Ariel, right? He's an icon of the sport. You know what I mean? Like, people hate him, people love him, and that's why he's an icon, because you need to have balance, right? So let's talk about just Ariel leaving ESPN, right? And the void that it will put on ESPN and their coverage of the UFC, because that leaves what? Mark Ramondi's over there. He's great. He's a great writer. There's a couple guys. You got what is it? Brett Okamoto. He's the one that does a lot of the interviewing. And Ariel did a lot of the interviews, and he had multiple shows, right? He had the show with DC, he had the show with Chael Sonnen, and he had his own show where we do interviews. So with all of that going on, all the stuff that Ariel was doing, let's start with you, Dylan. Like, what is the impact do you think it's going to have on ESPN that now that he's gone?
I think if anything, it'll just create certain opportunities for that next individual to kind of like get to that next tier, as it were, and kind of get certain things happening there. It's interesting. I mean, I think if anything, Ariel just kind of sees what's available out there. Like, ESPN is the gold standard for sure. I mean, you talk about the connectivity with like SportsCenter and certain things like that. I mean, I had a similar kind of upbringing, just always seemed to be on, just like the thing that starts the morning and everything like that. But I mean, Ariel talks to all these different fighters in the context of what's available for them free agency wise. I feel like if anything, he's kind of looking at the free agency scene in his own sort of role and just seeing what's out there and what's available. So it kind of makes sense. I was admittedly caught off guard when I saw that he was leaving ESPN, but then I started thinking about it a little bit, and it's like, well, he has great reach in the space. He's a known media member for sure, maybe the most known media member, and yeah, can certainly get a lot of things going in that sense. So curious to see what some of the next steps will be.
Spencer, Ariel, he's been covering the sport for a long time, just as long as probably yourself. And he's been in front of the camera. And I remember the first time seeing him was maybe back in the Strikeforce days, right? For Fan House. I believe he was covering the sport for them. It was very it's pretty much a lot of the guys right now that are starting out. That's how Ariel started out, except for he was at his shows doing, and there was not much competition, right? Of what he was doing, that on camera stuff. So he's been around, he's blazed his path. Now at ESPN, right? Like, who fills in? You know what I mean? Does Brett Okamoto fill in? Because Brett Okamoto is great and he has a lot of experience, but he's not Ariel.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, I don't think anybody necessarily steps into those shoes, because they're gigantic shoes, and all the respect in the world, all the congratulations really to Ariel for what he's done over the years, building the way a lot of people have, from literally the ground up, getting started, wanting to do this, committing to it, and graduating through and kind of matriculating his way along to get to ESPN. I think the thing that's going to be interesting is, you mentioned the different shows that he did, the different platform kind of opportunities that he had. So it'll be interesting to see if ESPN looks to kind of fill those voids. I don't think Brett is necessarily the guy to do it. I don't think that Brett necessarily wants to be that on-air kind of host the way that Ariel was. If I was picking somebody in-house, I'm going to throw another Canadian name out there. I'm going to throw Arda Okal out there. He's recently started doing some sports centers. I went to university with Arda. That's how long we go back. So I'm always going to rep for him. I'm always going to ride for him. Terrific at what he does. Did a bunch of MMA stuff up here in Canada for the Score before he moved to the States and started chasing those dreams. But it's also just going to be about whether they start doing some different produced stuff with the UFC, who obviously have some hosts of their own, Megan O'Leary, Karen Bryant, Laura Sanko, Brendan Fitzgerald as well. And then just kind of figuring out what lane ESPN wants to go in terms of this coverage. I think it's a huge loss. Nobody's going to argue otherwise, both in terms of the name recognition that Ariel brings to the platform and the amount of content he brings. So it's really going to be interesting to see sort of what these next, 3 to 6 months shake out in terms of trying some things and figuring out how to not necessarily replace him, but make up for all of that content that's walking out the door.
Yeah, making up for that content is going to be something that everybody's going to be waiting to see who fills in, who comes in. I was throwing out that theory of like they're not going to bring in anybody. They're just going to have Stephen A. Smith do everything. Yeah. And we've seen him just recently. He did an interview with Nate Diaz, right? So I could see them just covering the major UFC events and maybe pulling back on the fight nights and not having that much coverage of the fight nights like they did before. Could that be a possibility, Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly an option. There's also guys like Phil Murphy who has done a ton of stuff, especially with the overseas ESPN extensions, who really knows his stuff, is really great at what he does, is a host in that sort of, not necessarily the Ariel mold, but is a polished, experienced ESPN host. But I do think it's possible that, they maybe not dial it all the way back, but kind of rely on some of the UFC produced content to pump up those fight night shows rather than bringing somebody in to sort of host 1 or 2 different shows similar to what Ariel was doing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Dylan, what do you think? If they were going to bring in maybe 1 or 2 people to fill in his shoes, do you see anybody in the MMA space that could just step up and that might be ready for that?
I don't know in the MMA space necessarily. Like a name for that specific kind of role isn't readily coming to mind. The Stephen A. Smith mention was an intriguing one too, and I think that would coincide with just what the UFC has seemingly been doing since, because it seems like they had a bit of a boom with their business in the midst of this pandemic here and stuff like that, like more casual interest, a lot more people watching fights than have ever been watching fights. So to the point of getting a Stephen A. Smith on board, that would facilitate the on-camera, hosting-oriented entertainment kind of space, but then also bringing in more viewers from that casual sort of fan base and stuff like that. So maybe they just do that kind of thing. Maybe bring like a Skip Bayless or a Shannon Sharp or something like that. Just people who have like that level of repute outside the immediate MMA space, just drum up the attention and get more casuals kind of into it.
Yeah, just, like, I don't think it's a situation of like access, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the times when journalists or media members are hired by publications or outlets, it's about how much access that they have on top of the talent, right? On top of their skills and everything. I don't think it's that situation with ESPN and Ariel. His contacts really don't matter, I don't think, at ESPN, because ESPN is connected to the UFC. The UFC could give you all the context you need, right? Am I lying about that? Because think about it. Like, do they need Ariel for context, Spencer?
I mean, I don't know that you necessarily have access to everybody. Like, I'm not going to sit here and underplay the reach and connectivity of Ariel Helwani, who is connected to everyone. Mm-hmm. There is not a person in this game that if he reached out to try to get a hold of them and talk to them, he couldn't get to. And that's rare. That's unique to what he does. And so with the UFC specifically, absolutely, there's a way to connect with all of those athletes through the different PR arms and things like that, and maybe directly through some of the writers and journalists that are on staff there already and management and things like that. But it's not as easy to just say, oh, well, we're ESPN and we're partners with the UFC or the PFL or whoever it may be. So one of these guys that's here can connect us with that person, because I mean, that's one of the many things that Ariel did so well and continues to do so well, is have those relationships and build them and continue them. So again, that's going to be a part of this 6-month waiting period of just kind of sitting back to see how everything shakes out.
Yeah, with Ariel, he has that connectivity, right? He carries that to wherever he lands. And there's the rumors of him going and working for the Action Network. And when you look at his work with ESPN, he did cover MMA mostly, but he did the NBA also. And I feel like another part of him leaving to go with like an action network would be him covering other sports such as the NBA. Because if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Ariel really actually wanted to cover other sports, not MMA initially. I think his passion was in other sports. The MMA kind of fell in his lap. I don't know if am I wrong about that, Spencer? Do you remember the origin story of Ariel?
No, I mean MMA is the thing that he always wanted to, like, let's be clear. Dude loves basketball. Dude is a hooper. Like, dude can play. Dude's got game. But MMA was always the thing that he identified as the sort of niche market or the area that he can go in and carve this path that he did carve for himself. But I do think now that he has done the ESPN years, now that he's had that exposure and opportunity to dip his toes in with the NBA stuff over these last 3 years, that's got to be part of it, right? Like, everybody gets stale at some point and wants another challenge and wants to kind of test themselves and try themselves. And he's proven in this industry and with that initial basketball exposure that he can do both. And so if this is a chance for him to branch out and do more things and become kind of maybe more of an all-around host, more power to him, man.
Yeah, imagine having a show where you're having, let's say, Francis Ngannou, and then later on the show you're having LeBron James. Like, could you pass up on the opportunity like that? It'd be hard, right?
Well, that's just it. I mean, it seems like it's just something that aligns with just the multiplicity of his interests. Like, obviously MMA is something he's been really in the space of for a while, a lot of traction for sure. And just, I mean, he seems to be quite knowledgeable about the basketball as well. So yeah, I mean, my thing is like more power to him. Like, if you can put yourself in a position creatively and as being a content creator where you're checking off as many boxes as possible, I mean, that's the spot to be for sure. I mean, so really think it's cool to see that with Ariel, and yeah, you know, more power to him.
Yeah, and they're talking about they were paying him a 500,000 or 500K a year, and I'm pretty sure these other networks are offering him maybe even close to $1 million. It's hard to pass up that freedom of, you know, of covering what you want to cover more, on top of getting more money and maybe even owning your own content. Dylan, like, that's a beautiful situation if Ariel is in that situation when he leaves ESPN.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it represents what a lot of content creators would want to have, just that like true, genuine autonomy. Like, you can navigate whatever space you want to. And it seems like he's doing just that. So it's really exciting to see. If anything, I would hope there would be some level of trickle down effect for other media members. And as far as creating that level of inspiration, like, this is something that is achievable in a sense. If you stay the course, work hard, you too can have a similar kind of thing. But yeah, you got to stay the course for sure.
Yeah, John Nutt, he's saying that he wanted to be Howard Cosell. I know who Howard Cosell is, but I don't really know like the extent of his popularity, because that's like way before my time, right? When was Howard Cosell covering sports? Like during Muhammad Ali era, right? Which is
early Monday Night Football. So Ariel has always framed it as he wanted to be the Cosell essentially to Dana White's Muhammad Ali. And so he did it. I mean, for a number of years, he did it, right? We all watched them before and after every pay-per-view. Ariel and Dana stand there. They have their, 20, 30-minute conversation. They touch on all the topics. We all get those nuggets. Aggregators get all their content. And so he achieved what he set out to. And so, as Dylan's saying, if he can go off and now have the autonomy to do whatever he wants, probably an opportunity to work with multiple people or establish his own platform. Like, I can't see any of those shows necessarily going away. They might not be able to happen with contracted ESPN people, but there's a whole wealth of people that he can reach out to if he gets the opportunity to launch his own platform, to do something in those regards, in addition to wherever he ends up. This is the chance for him to just kind of branch out and do all the stuff that he wants to do, which is really inspiring, as Dylan was saying. Like, it makes you stop and go, okay, now we're seeing a guy from our space do it. Maybe I can't get to Ariel's level, or maybe I can if I'm, the next 15, 18-year-old kid that wants to get started. If I'm Nick Baldwin in Winnipeg, like I want to get rolling, shout out to Nick. Here it is. Here's proof that it's possible.
Yeah, he's laid down the blueprint. That's for sure, right? If you want to go from pretty much the beginning with nothing to what he has now, which is everything, and you can't hate on that, man. Like the dude hustled his way through the whole thing. It's not like he was fed everything, right? There's a lot of luck involved in it, right? But then there's a lot of hard work and talent and adjustments, right, throughout the years for himself. And one thing is, Ariel is at that point where he doesn't have to be at shows. Right. I mean, he doesn't have to be there. He doesn't have to cover the shows on, he doesn't have to be on the ground to do anything. He could just do it from his basement, which is crazy, right? Like he could just be in his basement doing his show for the rest of his life, which is kind of like the situation most people would like to be, right? Because traveling is fun, but at the same time, it can be
gets tiring.
Yeah, it's tiresome, man,
and also a little pricey.
Yeah, exactly. The money is there, and then
like
Ariel,
he has a family, right? He's got kids. You don't want to be gone for 3-4 days a week, even if you're just traveling for that pay-per-view week. So once a week, you're gone for 4 or 5 days, whatever it is. When your kids are at that age that they're starting school and starting activities and things like that, you want to be home. You want to be around for those things. You don't want to be missing anything with your children. And we know he's shared how much his family means to him and how much of a family man he is. And so to be able to do this and have access to opportunities where he doesn't have to go anywhere, or at most, there's some studio in the New York or New Jersey area that he can pop into to record a couple shows and then go home. That's gold, man. I'm super excited for him. I'm super happy for him.
Yeah, another aspect too is right now I believe Ariel, he's building a team, and you don't know what that team. You don't know how many people are on the team. You don't know like who he's selected. It might be somebody that's watching this show that covers the sport. Who knows, right? Because you don't know how much power he's gonna have, right, when he moves on from ESPN. But yeah, man, I can't wait to see what he does. And yeah, and everybody's gonna be watching. You could be a hater, but haters watch more than the fans, right?
That's
so
right.
We'll see what happens with Ariel, man. Props to him, and on both sides too. ESPN, how do they fill that void? We're gonna have to watch and see what happens with that. But Spencer mentioned like they do have people in house that could probably just take little pieces of what Ariel was doing and just do that and cover that. And yeah, and Phil Murphy, right? Phil Murphy, he's great. I believe also doesn't Jimmy Smith do some work with ESPN too?
I think Jimmy's gone now. Jimmy's the lead announcer of Monday Night Raw. So shout out and congrats to Jimmy, who is doing phenomenal. Like it is a hard gig. We saw, again, I'm throwing Canadians out there. Adnan Vert got the opportunity. He's a former guy from The Score and from Sportsnet and ESPN for a number of years. I think he lasted a week, 2 weeks. And I know that it was a mutual thing and the travel was tough, but it's also a hard thing to do, is go out there and call live sports and call live wrestling. And Jimmy has just walked in and been seamless. It's so crazy to see. Dude is so good at whatever he touches. It's awesome to have him back on the microphone and killing it.
All right, Dylan, let's start with you on the next topic. I want to transition over to Mayweather, Logan Paul. You know what I mean? It was something that happened over last weekend. I didn't watch it. I'm going to be truthful to you. But I just wanted to ask you about it and to get your thoughts on what you thought about the fight, if you did watch it, and the aftermath of it, like people saying Mayweather should retire, but isn't he already retired? That's the funny part.
Yeah, I think it's just like even in the context of an exhibition, like the idea is just drilled into people's heads that there's not going to be an official winner here, but you see people coming out after the fact. I mean, like you saw Jake Paul getting the troll antics going on, and he's talking about how his brother beat Floyd Mayweather and it's 50-1 and all this kind of stuff, really working the shtick, as it were. But I don't know, the fight itself, it kind of just aesthetically reminded me of like an old like Pride fight in a way. Like it's like you have this gigantic like jacked action figure looking dude against the more compact, like technician kind of guy. Like it reminded me of like, yeah, certain like pride fights back in the day. It had like the novelty aspect. And like, I don't know, I kind of like the weird tradition of boxing exhibitions and stuff like that. Like George Foreman way back in the day in Toronto fought 5 men in a single night. Like stuff like that. It's like, you know, I'm kind of here for it if it's like presented in the appropriate way. And I think this event admittedly was. I think they really leaned into the, you know, circus attraction kind of aspect of it. As far as the fight itself, it was not a terribly exciting fight, but I didn't expect much, so it wasn't like I was disappointed. That's what I found weird with certain people. They were like, so, oh, I can't believe I spent my money on this. I can't believe I wasted my time on this. It's like, what did you expect to happen? What did you think would transpire here? We got what we saw. I mean, I don't know. I thought the Ocho Cinco fight was kind of fun too. It's kind of interesting seeing him kind of hit the deck there briefly, and had a curious post-fight interview there talking about how he lost his virginity or something like that. I was like, oh, well, a little too much information there, but yeah, I don't know. Kind of was what it was. Bit curious to see that on the Showtime platform, but you know.
Yeah, that's another thing is the Showtime platform, Spencer. Like you would expect that from Triller, but from Showtime, has Mayweather gotten so big to where Showtime has to do these fights? Because I know that Mayweather is not going to retire. I don't know for sure, but I've heard things that he has other fights lined up, other exhibitions lined up.
I mean, he's said at least twice now that was it, and he's done. And I'm leaving. I'm walking away. I'm done. That's it. And then he comes back. And so we all know that you put enough dollar signs in front of that man. And again, not begrudging anybody for getting that bag. Like, if somebody wants to give you all of this money to go and do this, get it, get paid, get yours. People are interested. I'm not. I didn't watch it. I wasn't one of those people that was roped in and thinking this is going to be something important and special, and then feeling like I got ripped off for my $50. It was exactly what I expected it to be. It was weird, as Dylan said. It's got some throwback vibes to it. Like, we've seen weird stuff like this, whether it's Pride, whether it's, you know, you want to go fictional and go Rocky versus Thunderlips. This is where we're at right now, right? Like, that's the other part of it. This is what people are most interested in. So of course, people like Floyd are going to capitalize. Of course, the Paul brothers are going to capitalize. We're going to keep seeing it. This weekend, it pains me that I know this, but this weekend, Lamar Odom is boxing Aaron Carter, and people are going to pay for it. People are going to order that thing, and Chuck's the ref, and it's going to be trash. It is going to be a dumpster fire, but everybody's going to get paid. And that's the thing that matters right now. And so whether we like it or not, this is going to continue. The only thing for me, and I talked about it kind of over the weekend as the fight was happening and a little bit on Monday morning, is that this thing gets covered like it's not this exhibition. Like, it's not going to be exactly what we saw on Sunday, and it gets covered in greater depth and detail than some of these different really quality fight cards, whether it's UFC. There's a Bellator event tomorrow that very few people know of, featuring one of the probably 10 best welterweights on the planet, maybe even 5 best welterweights on the planet, Douglas Lima, against an undefeated guy in Yaroslav Amosov. It's a terrific fight. It might be the best fight of the weekend, and it's getting zero attention. But Floyd and Logan Paul got a ton. People are jacked up about Clarissa Shields tonight. Understandably, it's interesting, it's curious, but so the only thing for me is that we need to kind of treat it the right way and put it in the right context. And I, as a, get on my soapbox, grumpy old man, shakes fist at cloud, want to see kind of the actual professional events get covered a little more. But this is the stuff that's moving units and generating traffic. And so it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And if it's here, Floyd will be here for it.
As a person that covers combat sports, like, if I had the opportunity to be down there for that event, I would 100% go down there. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, you know what I mean? But as a fan, I didn't watch it because it's just like,
right.
I'm not really interested in Floyd as much, and Logan Paul, not interested at all. I'm actually more interested in Jake Paul. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm interested in Jake Paul and the steps he takes in his boxing career, because he's actually going to face somebody next that could knock his
This,
head off, right?
this
And
fight
that's
with Tyron
interesting.
is the first one I'm genuinely interested in.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you know, like with the going back to the Lamar Odom thing, man, wasn't he in a coma from like a drug
Yeah, I
overdose or
mean,
something like a couple years ago? Like I don't understand how he comes back from that to this but it's an exhibition, right? This is all exhibition, and he's like 10 feet taller than Aaron Carter, and Aaron Carter has problems of his own, probably drugs are involved. Man, it's celebrity boxing at
No,
its worst right now.
no,
Yeah,
probably about it.
yeah.
oh, Aaron
And
Carter's high key going through it. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
let's just be real here.
yeah.
yeah, he should go for the single leg because you know that would probably be easy to grab. Now, when you look at like these exhibition boxing matches, right? I look at it like this: it's like TV, right? There's good TV, right? There's like Breaking Bad, there's The Wire. That's good TV, right? Like something you could watch, you could appreciate, you know, the art, the skill, right? Then you got, you know, Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul. That's like the Bad Girls Club, you know, like something that it's like trash TV, but you're gonna watch it, and a lot of people are gonna watch it because for some reason you can't keep your eyes off of it, and I think that's what the world is. What they're doing is they're grasping onto that, and they're kind of like transfixed because of the trash TV that's out there, like the what is it, Keeping Up with the Kardashians and stuff like that. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen this couple of those. You know what I mean? It gets interesting somehow for some way, right? But then you realize, okay, there's better TV out there, such as Bellator and the UFC and One Championship and PFL. But a lot of people in this world don't care about that better version of television. They care about the trash more because why? It's like a quick fix. It's like a drug, you know, it's like fast food to
It's
them.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy. It's not like they have to figure things out. And that's why this stuff will never go away. And I think Jake Paul, he's going to be the first one to actually transition from that trash. Like Mayweather's devolving into it, right? But Jake Paul's like evolving, right? So it's kind of interesting to see both sides of that move forward. So, but anyways, connecting that to mixed martial arts, right? And after that fight, Francis Ngannou tweets out something to do with about the money, right? That Jake Paul's earning. I think he's earning what? Oh man, I forgot how much he's earning, but he's earning like 20 million or something like that for that fight, and it's an exhibition. And Francis Ngannou tweets out, "What are we doing wrong, Dylan? What are we doing wrong?"
Well, I mean, you look at guys like Logan Paul, Jake Paul, it's like they are brands unto themselves. Like in the context of the UFC, that is the brand. I mean, as much as Francis Ngannou is an exemplary fighter, heavyweight champion, everybody wants to come see this guy. He's ultimately going to get a smaller slice of the pie because like a lot of that prior promotion falls squarely on the Paul brothers. Like they've accrued this level of interest over time through their social media platform and just really working the marketing well and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. It's like they're pretty much in like a self-employment kind of capacity almost. And then you see a person like Francis Ngannou who is in more of like in an employee kind of spot. It's sad to see for sure because it's like just like what you were saying before. You hope that the high quality fights, the high quality martial artists, like they get the bulk of the attention. But I think it's just mostly centered around that. Like the Paul brothers have full autonomy of it and everything like that. And yeah, with like Ngannou and different guys like that. Paulo Costa, another guy who vocalized some grievances too. But yeah, it's like comes down to just the, I guess, nomenclature of it all. It's like the employee versus like I have like my own business and I'm creating it mostly myself kind of thing.
Yeah, man, with the Francis Ngannou, right, and John Jones fighting with the UFC over pay, and Francis Ngannou should be the fight that he takes, but they're not going to put that fight together because John Jones doesn't want to take the pay cut or doesn't want to fight for the money that they're offering him. It's weird. Like, do you see Francis maybe fighting back with the UFC and saying like, okay, you want me to fight again? Maybe I should get paid more, or do you think that's just a tweet, a random tweet, Spencer?
I mean, I think every fighter, rightfully so, is going to continue to advocate for themselves and the greatest payday that they can earn. And certainly seeing this stuff, for whatever reason, they just assume that there's a 1-to-1 correlation and one-to-one comparison that if this guy that isn't an athlete can go out and make that, then why can't I make more? And it's exactly what Dylan says. And I know that it is super easy and super convenient to just be like, well, the UFC is cheap and Dana's this and Dana. And look, that's certainly part of it. The UFC could, if they wanted to, pay everybody more money. But I don't know whoever first said it, but I've heard it a million times over. Rich people and rich companies don't get rich by giving away their money. And if they don't have to, they're not going to give away their money. The other part of it is exactly what Dylan said. Like, I was just looking at my phone. Jake Paul has 16 million Instagram followers. That's an entirely different stratosphere than any MMA fighter. Like, we're in this bubble, and the MMA community, God love it, goes, these are the best fighters. Why aren't they getting this? It is entirely different, the demographic and the reach that the Paul brothers have, that some of these Twitch stars, some of these people that have been in these exhibitions have, that certainly a 42-year-old like me doesn't know and understand and recognize. But then when you think of it in those terms and you look at it in those terms and you hear Bill Simmons on his podcast, one of the biggest sports podcasts in the business, talking about his kid has been watching the Paul brothers for years, and that was the fight that he was most interested in. That's why they're getting paid that much. It's this huge demographic of people that we don't think of that aren't necessarily watching MMA events. That thing sold over 1 million pay-per-views. It's bonkers. It doesn't make sense to me, but it certainly is there. And it's because exactly what Dylan said. They bring all of that platform, all of that brand that they already have established over the last 5, 6, 8, 10 years, whatever it is, and just here's 16 million Instagram followers to pull from. And if we get 1/16 of them, we're just taking it straight to the bank. And so fighters are always going to advocate for more, rightfully so. 100%. Francis Ngannou should try to get paid as much as he possibly can. Shout out to his management at CAA, Markel Martin. Go get some. Get as big a bag as you can, homie. But it's not going to be 20 million that Logan Paul got. It's just not.
Yeah, definitely true. It's something that as the years go, it'll build up and build up and build up, and the fighters will get paid more. But it's a slow process, man. And we're gonna always talk about it, and we're gonna always advocate better fighter pay, no matter where we're at, right? Because we're not gonna let somebody control our thoughts. And this is the hardest sport in the world, man. We know what the fighters go through every single camp, every single fight, and the aftermath of that. We still don't even know what's the aftermath of a hard career in MMA yet, right? We haven't seen it yet to the fullest. You know, it's not like this sport is 100 years old. So,
I mean, there's a few sad cases, I guess, like Spencer Fisher. I mean, that was a bit of a rough one to say, you know, the very least. Like, that was a bit of a hard article to read through. I mean, just like pretty aggressive CTE. So, I mean, you hope these guys, I mean, there should be some plan for their retirement, especially with guys like that. I mean, he was just like a performance of the night bonus machine, you know what I mean? And just sad to see how broken down he is, just physically and cognitively, and doesn't seem to have the financial wherewithal to like overcome that. It's unfortunate, to say the very least. Yeah,
for sure.
What about Diego Sanchez, man? Like, Diego Sanchez looking like he's going down that path, right? You know, he's been through so many wars, Dylan, and you know, the whole Joshua Fabia situation and how he was somewhat manipulated by him, and now it's just like he's at this crossroads of should he? I don't even think other promotions want to touch him because of like all of that stuff that happened at the end of his contract with the UFC. And now he's talking about boxing. I'm pretty sure boxing is the path, because they don't care who they put in there. They just put it anyway that's going to draw some attention. Now, let's talk about Paulo Costa, because that's connected to fighter pay too. He said that he never signed a contract, and he's citing, you know, compensation as an issue when he's stepping into that cage again, because he's a main event guy. He wants to get paid main event. I think he tweeted out that he wants $350K or more. Dylan, he deserves it. Of course, we all agree on that. But man, do you think that he never signed a contract? Because Dana White came out and said that he did sign a contract.
Yeah, I'm admittedly not too sure on that end of things. But again, it's not necessarily an anomaly to see fighters sign certain contracts and then like a fight or two in there, they're kind of not digging the pay as much. But I think the folly in that is signing some of these bigger deals. Like certain fighters will be locked into these 6-fight, 8-fight kind of deals. I understand why it is. It's to create some level of job security, and you're going to be tied to this certain promotion for a certain period of time. I get the need for that, but you never know where you're going to be even in a couple fights. Like we see it all the time in mixed martial arts. Certain guys are in a particular spot and it's like, I don't know about them. Middle of the road kind of guy, almost don't know what their upward mobility is. And then they put together a couple highlight reel wins and just the scale goes up that much higher. So I think a lot of it is tied to that, just the quandary of like, do I go with the job security? Do I go with like the lengthier kind of fight contract? Or do I take a bit of a gamble on myself and kind of see where things go there? But yeah, I mean, I agree Paulo Costa should be paid a certain amount of money. I mean, you have a guy who contended for a UFC World Championship in his last outing. He's put on some great fights, and that Yoel Romero fight was quite entertaining. So yeah, you definitely want to see the man get paid.
Yeah, definitely. And with Dana White's interview, I believe it was with TSN with Aaron Bronstetter, right? He said that, hey, if you want to get paid like the Paul brothers, start a YouTube page when you're 13. But it's actually great advice, though. You know what I mean? Like if you're an up and coming athlete and you know that you want to be a fighter, even if you want to be in the NBA or the NFL or the MLS or whatever, right? The Premier League, it is a good idea to get on these platforms early, young, right? And create content on top of molding yourself into an elite athlete, right, Spencer? Like I think it is good.
I mean, even keeping it just to MMA, right? Like we're seeing what athletes like Paige Van Zandt, what athletes like Valerie Loretta. I mean, look, CM Punk said, I want to come and try myself in the UFC. He was a big enough name that he could walk in and do it and get paid a good amount of money, even though he is a 0-0 fighter with very limited experience, like limited background. And so as much as everybody wants to, that's a good suggestion right there. As much as everybody wants to say, oh, well, here's X, Y, and give Dana shit for what he said to Aaron, he's right. Like, control your brand, build your brand, do what you need to do to make yourself that much more desirable and in demand. Like it's so funny to me because we want to deride guys like Sean O'Malley or Sage Northcutt before him that get this big push and make these big dollars before some of the tenured guys because they've built a brand and because they've built an audience and because people want to see them. But then when Dana says, turn yourself into somebody that people want to see and build that brand, everybody says, well, that's stupid. Well, we've seen we've seen that that's actually the thing the UFC is paying a lot of attention to. And so as much as it sounds like a dismissive comment, and, you know, it certainly probably is a little bit, it's also the truth. Like, go out and turn yourself into somebody that is undeniable. Make yourself undeniable to the point that when you say, I want X dollars, the UFC goes, that's still a deal for us. Yep, we're in.
You know, like with MMA, like you said, let's stick to MMA and WMMA scene now. He makes a great point about Ryan Garcia's model. And yeah, young fighters should follow that. But on top of that, I think another aspect you got to look at it is when you're an amateur, right? You don't get paid to compete, but you can make money off yourself with the YouTubes, with the Instagrams and all of that platforms. And there's going to be more platforms in the future. You know what I mean? Like there's Twitch, right? You could make money off that. You could be a fighter gamer. You know what I mean? Like there's so many, like nowadays it's like you got to have your hand in multiple bags, right? It's not like you're just in MMA only, because there's only a handful of guys that could do that, where they could just focus on MMA and they could just use their talents and build themselves, and then they go straight to the title, and then they win the title, and then they make a lot of money, and they ride off into the sunset, you know, like John Wayne in a classic, you know, Western, right? There's only a handful. So you got to think like, okay, you got to be realistic with yourself. It's like, am I talented enough to where I'm going to be able to get up to that level to where I'm going to become a UFC champion and become a person that's going to etch myself in history, or am I going to be a fighter, but also on top of that, I'm going to be a gamer. I'm going to be, a YouTuber. I'm going to do all of these things because why? I'm thinking about my future, and fighting doesn't last forever. Like, you got to learn from a lot of these guys that are coming up right now, the young kids that are 13 or 12 that look up to Conor McGregor, that look up to, what is it? John Jones or Demetrius Johnson or whatever. You got to look at what they did. I don't want to say necessarily wrong, but look at what they did and say, okay, I got to do better than that. You know what I mean? Because, go ahead, Spencer.
And DJ's a perfect example, right? Like, he wasn't somebody that got this great big push from the UFC because they found him difficult to market. He wasn't a guy that drew big pay-per-view numbers. He absolutely steered into what he does, what he enjoys. He was one of the first guys that I can remember hearing about Twitch through. And he went out and he created the Mighty Squad. And even before that, he was, branding deals and sponsorship deals with Microsoft because of the Pacific Northwest connection, and then did the Twitch thing and started doing that and figured out how to make himself a bigger name and generate more income outside of his day-to-day. He created secondary revenue streams and different income streams for himself. And as you're saying, you got to look at these people that are doing it. I mean, again, I'm flipping through my phone, and it's not to be disrespectful. I mean, the comment that is there, right? Like, Paige has it. She was one of the people I just looked up. It's 2.8 million followers on Instagram, man. And when the bare knuckle rematch with Rachel Ostovich was announced, the reason that the tweet was funny is because it was 100% true. Come for the boobies and stay for the violence. People are going to. She's created an attraction to her that goes beyond what she's capable of in the cage necessarily. And that's what people need to do. Because as you're saying, of like the limited number of people that climb the ladder and just strictly fight and reach this ultimate status are few and far between. And there's no guarantees there. DJ holds the record for the most consecutive successful title defenses in the UFC. And he wasn't a guy that pulled eyeballs and prompted the UFC to say, here's all the money you could hope for. Not that he's necessarily a money motivated guy, but that just shows you that it's not just about, it's not even close to wholly about what you do inside the cage.
And DJ, he's still young and he's accomplished so much, but he's set. I think he's made so much money already, and he's going to continue making money even if he stops fighting today. Like, he has his Twitch. He probably has other ventures outside of fighting that is making him some revenue, right? So where, I think he's like in his early 30s right now. Man, if you could retire in your early 30s, you've had a successful life, right? Like, continuing without getting punched in the head. Dylan, like, if you had a fighter, right, that was like, let's say 15 years old, their dream is to become, their dream is to make money in this world of combat sports, right? Not necessarily to be a champion. Like, what would you put together for them as like a path to become successful?
I think it's just centered around figuring out what aspect of your personality or general beingdom that people resonate with, and then kind of going from there. I think some people have this idea in their head of like not wanting to get too involved in the social media kind of stuff. They want to just like stick with the fighting path. And I do understand that too, but it doesn't have to necessarily be this like over the top, contrived, performative sort of thing. It's like there's tons of different platforms out there. There's innumerable mediums, a lot of ways to convey your personality. Like, I mean, if you're not out here looking to do TikTok dances, you don't have to, right? Like, you can, I don't know, you can start like an Instagram page, or you can just have different things tailored to your skills, your personality, just aspects of your personhood that you want to, I guess, broadcast on a larger scale. And I would say that, yeah, just focus on like what aspect of yourself seems most engaging, like what elicits that certain level of interest. And then also just finding, I think, a certain medium that resonates with it too.
And also, I think if you're young, and nowadays kids are so tech savvy to the point where, like, if you have a friend, you could get your friends to come along and join the ride. You know what I mean? Like, you could get a friend to film everything. You know what I mean? You have a phone. Like, that's all you need. You need a phone and one of those sticks, right? One of those, like, gimbal type things, and then he just follows you, or she just follows you and films everything, edits it. You get them involved. They got a job now. They don't have to go work part-time at Jack in the Box or McDonald's or whatever. I'm pretty sure you would rather work, and build something and learn a skill rather than going to Jack in the Crack and taking orders at the drive-thru, right? Like, that's something that I look at too. Like, I have a daughter. My daughter's in 4th grade right now. But like, I'm not looking at her and saying like, oh, you have to go to the best school or you have to be a doctor. I'm saying like, we need to find out like what you're good at. And if you're good at cooking, then we're going to have to send you to some like cooking schools in middle school, right? Like, you got to go like academies or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, if you're good at, like, if you want to do YouTubing, like, we got to get you some classes on YouTubing. If you want to do art, we got to get you classes on art. Like, I think that's where we're at right now. A lot of these kids, that's what they need to see. Like, they need to start looking around them. And if you're a fighter, looking around you and saying like, hey, you got friends, right? If you don't have friends, then there's a lot of problems there too, right? But but as a fighter or as an athlete, you got a lot of people around you, right? And they all have different talents themselves. You got to utilize that, right? Just like, and they'll benefit off you too, right? Because like, if you look at Israel Adesanya, he had this film crew following him for a long time. But now it seems like the only film crew that's following him is his brother. And Israel has his own YouTube page now, and off his fame already built, I think it has like 500,000 subscribers already. And it's only been a couple of months. And his brother films everything. Now his brother has a revenue stream, right? Maybe his brother went to school for a couple of years on, editing and filming and all of that stuff. And now they're working on that together. Like, there's so much there, right? Like, there's so many ways of, building yourself. And if you start younger, it'll happen quicker, right? Especially if you're not even like a top 15 fighter. How many are there top 15 fighters right now? There's fighters right now that's not even in the UFC that are making money off other avenues. Like, what if you love sewing? Like, you could make your own sewing company. I don't know, man. Like, you love fashion, make your own fashion. Like, there's some things that you could.
There's an avenue for everything. There's a market for everything. And so if you have opportunity, if you have talent, let's be clear, talent is necessary. You have to have talent at whatever you pursue. But you were saying if your daughter shows an aptitude for cooking, yep, get her in those cooking classes, but also Instagram what she's doing, YouTube what she's doing, TikTok what she's doing. Take it and just explode and expand those things. You look at a guy like, and it's funny, you look at a guy like Bilal Muhammad, who competes this weekend, and I'm setting you up for a lovely transition into 263 talk. You're welcome. Starts by doing his picks with terrible circles on Twitter every week, right? Still doesn't know how to circle stuff. It's fine. It's entertaining. It's now part of the shtick. Builds that into his own hybrid game show, talk show, whatever you want to call it. Remember the show on the Anik and Florian podcast, looping in John Anik's twin brother, Jason, and now has become this guy that through both those things and his success in the cage and finally getting a bigger opportunity with that fight with Leon Edwards into a guy that you now know and you're paying more attention to and you're more interested in. But it started with him steering into his personality and who he is and the way he chooses to interact and likes to interact. And it has blossomed into something for him that so many other athletes on the UFC roster or any roster anywhere need to look at and go, that's what I need to do. Doesn't have to be the game show. Don't everybody rush out. It's the same as podcasts, right? Like, not everybody needs to rush out into a podcast. If you're not good at it, it's not your thing, but find your thing, as Dylan was saying, and then just expand it. Go find those people that can help you. Let them just expand those opportunities and see what you can do. Because it turns out there's people that want to pay you for this stuff. And so if you can cash in, I mean, there are people my wife follows on Instagram that are like the friends of a friend who just saw what that person was doing. And then they started posting and now they got deals and they're just influencers. And I'm sitting here thinking, I need some friends like that so I can become an influencer and continue to just sit at home and make money.
Definitely. Well, there's two very big success stories. Not Diego Sanchez is not one of them, but you got a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. his YouTube page, it's in the comments, is massive. The Korean Zombie doesn't even speak English. His YouTube page is massive, right? Like these guys are not guys that are talking trash. They're not a guys that are like, you know, like a Conor McGregor or whatever, but they're being successful using that avenue. And what I know from like the Korean Zombies YouTube channel, he has another company that comes in and edits everything for him. So he just films everything, and then they come in and make it look beautiful. And then that's what you see, right? And I'm pretty sure Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has the same situation. And if they stop fighting today, they could continue making videos, man. And then they're gonna get sponsors to come on eventually, and they're gonna make money off that. And then they could have a gym. They have their own successful gyms too. The Korean Zombie has his own gym. He has his own fight team. Wonderboy has his own gym also, which I believe is one of the most successful gyms in the state. And yeah, man, there's a lot of examples out there, right? Sean O'Malley, you know, Alan Bones Jones mentions him. So just keep going, man. And there's a lot of examples out there for young guys, and even in the media too, man. Let's flip it back around to the media, because we're part of it. Like there's guys that are doing different things, and just find out what you might be good at. And sometimes you just got to dibble and dabble in everything at the start, right? And once you dibble and dabble and find out like, this is not so good, this I'm good at, this is something I enjoy, but I'm not good at, but maybe if I work on it, I could be good at that aspect of it. So much, right? At the start, you have nothing to lose because there's not much to gain at the start either, right? Like there's not like, it's not like you're like getting paid like buku bucks at the start to do something. So, you know, do your thing. Now, like Spencer said, UFC 263, man. We got some major fights coming up. I wanted to focus on a couple of them. The first one, of course, is going to be, of course, the main event, man. We got to talk about that first, man. It's a rematch. The rematch with Adesanya and Vettori, man. I didn't get to watch the press conference earlier today because I was doing interviews. But Dylan, just give me a breakdown of like what exactly happened. I know that they were going crazy. They were going back and forth and it got heated. But do you think it was kind of like fake a little bit? Or do you think that they're really heated?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is a level of animosity between those guys. I mean, I think Chael Sonnen would have been pretty happy watching that press conference in the sense of Angry Marvin was out in full force. He was definitely cutting some promos, and yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and then you see like the diametrically opposed kind of instance of Nate Diaz, a guy who will say between 3 and 5 words, and people just like lose it, like just like this boisterous, crazy reaction. So, just an interesting press conference in a lot of different regards. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I could see there being some level of additional performative spice, but I think there's some base level visceral kind of beef these guys have with each other to some degree.
But I love that they're doing that, though. They're using that little bit of beef that they do have, but they also have respect for each other. Because you saw when they ran into each other, they were like, you know, it didn't like they were like in their face. It wasn't like a Jamal Hill and Paul Craig situation, right?
It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad. So there is a level of respect because they have shared 15 minutes with each other, man. So Dylan, let's talk about the fight though, like this rematch. A lot of people are picking Vettori to go in there and win this fight. I'm very surprised because I'm not very surprised because in this sport anything can happen. But I would give Adesanya a huge, he'd be a huge favorite in my books. What do you think of the whole situation here?
I think that kind of shows like the momentum-minded considerations of a lot of people in the sport, and I mean, much is discussed about recency bias and combat sports in general. I mean, you see Adesanya coming off of a loss to Jan Blachowicz, which, I mean, it was fairly competitive in certain regards, but you see this certain grappling-minded path whereby Izzy didn't necessarily have all the answers I think people were looking for. And I think maybe certain people look at Vettori's style and it's like, he's coming off of this certain loss. Does he potentially get out grappled again? But I'm more inclined to kind of see it from the perspective you're talking about. Like, I definitely favor Adesanya in this one here, but yeah, an intriguing fight. I think a lot of that rhetoric is informed by him losing to Blachowicz, but I think some of that also, not to take away from the technique of Jan Blachowicz, but I think some of that is informed by the size. I mean, you have Israel Adesanya coming back down to middleweight. Seems like a much more natural weight category for him. And we've seen in past too, even with like the binary of the Yoel Romero, to Paulo Costa fight, Adesanya seems like one of those guys who, when he has a performance that some deem underwhelming or maybe not up to the standard some have come to expect, he usually shows out pretty well in the next outing. So I kind of think we'll see something like that here.
Spencer, when you look at Adesanya and his last fight, of course he lost, right? He was taken down and Jan grinded on him. And then when you look at Vettori's fight, the first fight against Vettori, he was taken down, but Adesanya didn't take any damage. Like, people forget to remember that. Like, he was taken down, but Adesanya got back up, didn't take much damage on the ground, almost held him, a few times, but that's about it, right? Adesanya won that fight. Do you think like those things combined together gives Vettori, because it seems like Vettori, he really believes he won that fight. And if you're a fighter, that's confidence, right? So I feel like his confidence is at a crazy level right now, right? Like, it's not to the point of delusional, but he believes he's going to beat Adesanya. And at a certain point, I feel like, man, he does have a chance though, right? Because he is improved.
He's got a chance. I mean, I talked to him a couple weeks ago for a piece that drops tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. And we talked exactly about this. Like, he is 100% certain, almost to the point that he feels like it's destiny. Like, he loves the fact that it's back in the exact same venue. He loves the fact that it's, 3 years on, how much he's improved. We haven't necessarily seen a bunch of stylistic improvements or tactical improvements from Izzy. One could argue that's because he's already awesome. And he 100% believes he is going to go out there and become the first Italian fighter to win a UFC title. He does believe that he won that first fight. I disagree with him, but as you said, that's confidence to him. He won the third round, as you said as well. Didn't do a lot of damage. That's one of the things from the Kevin Holland fight and the Jack Hermanson fight. He's great at getting you down. He's not piling up the damage. And so he's going to need to continually put Izzy on his back and continually wrestle him for 25 minutes. I don't know if that's possible. It is also a thing. Like, I get the recency bias. I get, some of the poor performances that you can point to with Izzy. Like, this is a super interesting fight to me, because if you want to be that person, and I've written about this a couple times, and I'm not trying to be the person that wants to go back and like re-legislates Izzy's record, but like, the guy that gave him his biggest test is a guy that's struggling mightily now, and that's Kelvin Gastelum. He didn't look good against an aging Anderson Silva. He didn't look particularly good against the dangerous Yoel Romero, but in a fight where he didn't do much. I think he landed 48 significant strikes over 5 rounds. That's not a lot. He did, of course, look good in some of those performances against Paulo Costa and against Robert Whittaker. And so this feels, as Dylan was saying, like one of those kind of junction points where we're either going to see Izzy style out and just do all the things that he said at the press conference of ending this in the second round and making Marvin Vettori his new bitch and all of that stuff, or we're going to see Marvin Vettori rise to the occasion and this be a hell of a fight.
Dylan, when you watch the countdown, like every pay-per-view, I try to watch the countdowns, and you look at Vettori and his training, he's added a boxing coach, and ever since he's added that boxing coach, he's been undefeated, which means that he is focused a lot on his hands. And what's the best way to beat somebody? The best way to beat somebody is to beat them in their own game, right? And one thing that's, if you look at Vettori's record, he doesn't have any knockouts. The only knockout that he has on his record is a knee, never with his hands or elbows. And could he fall in love with the boxing in this fight because he wants to beat him so bad? Or do you think he has the IQ and he has the willpower to stick to a game plan and just ride out the victory against Israel?
I think it's interesting you bring that up. I think there will be some level of him indulging in the boxing, but I could see it as being more of a feint oriented kind of setup to facilitate the grappling. You know what I mean? Like, do that like boxer, wrestler, charge forward, get the pressure going, press Izzy up against the cage ideally, and get the grappling going. So I don't know that it'll be one of those things where like the grappling oriented guy falls in love with the striking and they think they're this like K1 level fighter kind of thing. I don't really see Vettori doing that in this instance. I can see him showing some level of fight IQ in using the boxing to, I guess, set up traps and just to facilitate getting the grappling going on with Izzy. So in that sense, I can see him utilizing it, but I don't think he gets like too lost in the whole striking exchange and tries to go for like the one punch knockout sort of deal.
Yeah, I think that's what happened with Costa and with Whitaker. They got lost in the striking exchanges, right? And then Izzy got into the flow. And once he gets into the flow and he gets that confidence and gets the distance, it's almost like inevitable that something bad is going to happen to his opponents. And one thing that also that you guys got to point out too is that Izzy, it's not like this is the first time losing. It's his first time losing an MMA fight, but it's not like his first time losing in a fight, right? He's lost fights. He's been knocked out before and come back, like Spencer said. So a lot of people, they forget about that. Recency bias, you know, that's something that we love to say all the time, but it's true. A lot of people forget, you know, what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
It's the one blemish on his MMA record, and people go, oh, well, he lost for the first time. How's he going to? He's lost a bunch in kickboxing. He's lost in boxing. He's talked about it. Like, this isn't the first time. I think Eugene Behrman was on one of the programs this week, I think maybe Embedded, saying, like, Izzy's got over 100 combined fights. He wasn't 99-0 going into Jan Blachowicz. He's dealt with this. He understands how to reset and how to move past it. And you have to give him credit, right? Like, from the jump of after that fight, he's handled it exceptionally well. He's said all the right things. He's addressed it the right way. He's back down at his natural weight class, taking on the next guy up. He didn't, you know, recede for 6 or 8 months to lick his wounds and figure some stuff out. He knows he went up. He took a risk. He challenged himself. It didn't pay off. Now I get to go back and be the world champion that I am and beat this guy that I've already beaten. So as much as Marvin Vettori is walking in full of confidence, believing that the stars are aligning and destiny happens on Saturday, Israel Adesanya has also beaten that man in that building. And for a guy that's always confident, that's another boost of confidence going into Saturday.
With Israel, he, you know, in my eyes, I think like he's the next star to transcend the sport, right? I think he has that ability. All he needs to do is continue winning. And his last fight, he did lose, but I don't feel like his stock dropped at all, man. I feel like his stock is the same as it was before the Jan Blachowicz fight. And the way that he handled the loss was very impressive, just like a lot of fighters in the past, like a Dominic Cruz, you know what I mean? Like, he just handled it like what it was, because when you look at it, this is also a sport. A lot of people forget that. This is a sport. In a sport, you lose and you come back from losses. You know what I mean? You come back from injuries. You come back from everything, right? You come back from adversity. And Israel, I think he's done that so much that he could come back and win this fight. But with that said, Vettori is so confident, man, and he's gonna go in there as a berserker. I think that's his mentality. I'm a berserker, right? And I'm gonna go in there and murk this dude, and I'm gonna show everybody that I'm the best. And the whole first Italian champion. I love that. It's romantic. It's so romantic, like how like the storyline, you know, entering this fight for Vettori is, if he does end up going in there, getting his first knockout of his career with his hands using boxing against a striker, which a lot of people believe Israel Adesanya is the best striker that we've ever seen in the UFC. If he does it and becomes the first Italian champion, it's like a movie, right? So let's see if he could write this. Let's see if he could make this movie come true. That's what I want to see. I'm down for it. Kill or be killed, like Israel Jacobson says. Yes, it's gonna be fun. Now moving on to the co-main event, we got another rematch, man. They love rematches, right? So Figgy versus Moreno. Figgy, who was this saying? Like at the press conference, I did see the press conference when they faced off. Figgy is like Figgy pushed Moreno.
Getting aggressive out here, yeah.
Yeah, like Figgy's very emotional, right? Do you think, Dylan, that that's going to be something that is going to be a hindrance for him in that cage?
It's interesting. I think it ultimately comes down to just different personality types. Like I think Figueiredo is more one of those guys who's like, I'm going to be the aggressive, like domineering kind of guy for intimidation purposes. Whereas Moreno is just happy-go-lucky, just jovial, having a great time. Like I was kind of taken aback. Well, not taken aback per se, but I thought it was curious how the crowd was receiving both of those guys at the press conference. Like, to use the parlance of pro wrestling, it's like Brandon Moreno was the baby face in this scenario, and Figueiredo was very much received as the heel. Like there was audible boos. It wasn't like it was like a mixed reaction. So yeah, on that level, I kind of found it curious. I don't know. I think there's some level of Figueiredo maybe putting a little too much stock in that first fight in the sense of like, oh, I was coming in at 30%. I'm going to knock you out in the first round this time. I just, like you brought up the point of Vettori before, maybe getting too aggressive, trying to go for that finish. Like there could be something like that with Figueiredo in this one, but I don't know. It's curious because he almost went for that in the last fight there. He tried to like almost like spam the first round KO, and when that didn't necessarily work out. So yeah, it's an intriguing fight on a number of levels. Like you wonder if he comes at it from the emotional perspective and tries to drive forward for that finish, or does he learn from that previous fight and maybe have like a more economy of energy minded kind of approach than the first time.
Yeah, this rematch in some ways, I think it's more intriguing than the main event. The reason why is because the first fight, it was on what, 3 weeks notice for both fighters, right? And they came in and Brandon, he did so well against Figgy, but I still believe Figgy won that fight. And if he was 30% and he still won that fight, that means if he goes in there with a full camp, but people are pointing to Figgy looking depleted in the press conference, man. I think that's the issue heading into this fight. Could he be having problems with his weight?
I mean, the weight cut's miserable for him. He's missed weight a couple times in the past. It's clearly a thing that we have to worry about every time this guy is set to fight, which is doubly concerning because he is a champion, right? Like it means, I mean, he said he was in the hospital and his management said he was in the hospital the like early morning hours of the fight, not necessarily because of the weight cut, but because of illness. But some of that is brought on by the weight cut. Like your immune system just isn't the same when you're depleting your body. And so we certainly have to look at those things and consider those things. But I'm in the same camp as you, John. Like if that was, let's even say he was 50%. They battle to a draw. It's a draw because of one of the loudest, most violent low blows I can remember. It's not because there was a 10-8 in there for Brandon Moreno where he, pulls it all the way back and makes it level that way. And so if he's 100% this time around and he's clearly fired up and pissed off about this, the way he was going into the second fight with Joseph Benavidez, when he was frustrated that nobody was recognizing him as the champion and all of these different things, I have a feeling that like this could be a moment where we walk away and go, oh, that dude is just on a different level than everybody in this division.
Yeah, that's the thing is like when I look at the skill set and look at everything and the style that he brings to the cage, I just think like if he continued winning, he could surpass DJ in just every aspect, right? But he's got to break the records, right? The records keep DJ at the top, but man, his style, that marauder style where he just goes in there and he's going for the kill every single time, I think that style, everything has to align perfectly for him to be able to perform like that for 25 minutes if he doesn't put away his opponent. And I think that's the risk he takes every single time he enters the cage, where he's going to go in there and just throw hard from the start. And I think Moreno, he's going to be smarter entering this rematch to where he's like, okay, I'm going to weather more at the start and not expend too much energy trying to, fight back, and just more of defense, and maybe even use a little bit more wrestling just to keep, Figgy guessing, and then turn it on, maybe in the third round, fourth round, or fifth round when Figgy is a little bit more tired. Because by the time the fourth and fifth round came, both those guys were spent, right? Because they were just throwing at each other the whole time. Dylan, is that the game plan? You're the coach.
Yeah, well, I feel like the short game, in a sense, favors Figueiredo. Like, if there is going to be an early finish of some sort, I think he's ultimately the one doing it. It's curious because, like I was saying before, Figueiredo in a position where he doesn't want to have the gas tank depleted in like the first couple rounds. But Moreno is also in a spot where he has to be defensively savvy, but he can't be offensively passive. Like he needs to be in there just enough, because if he's trying to play that game of like, oh yeah, put it on him in the 4th and 5th round. He might not see that round. He might be looking up at the lights, especially with a guy like Figueiredo, who has a demonstrable level of power for sure. But the point of him missing weight is a curious one too, especially with the backdrop of a lot of people talking about him as being the guy who's kind of reinvigorated the flyweight division, brought life back to it, kind of kept it this instantiated weight category in the UFC. So yeah, I mean, I hope he can just stay steady with the weight there, but I think there is some level, there's that confluence for Moreno of, like I said, having to be defensively efficient, but not like too passive with the offense either. But yeah, super intriguing fight. I don't know that we get the same fight in the rematch as the first time. I think there will probably be an earlier finish in this one if I'm to make a prediction.
With Moreno, I think that he's going to come in a lot smarter. I think his coaches are going to make major adjustments. Figueiredo, I don't really even think he has a game plan. I think that he just trades.
Oh, his game plan is smash. Yeah, his game plan is get you out of there in the first round
ASAP, right? And he could finish anywhere. That's the crazy part, right? Like usually guys are like, okay, I'm gonna knock you out, or okay, I'm gonna take you down and submit you. But Figueiredo is a guy that could knock you out, and he could take you down and submit you, and submit you in many different ways too. You know, it's just that Moreno, I don't see him knocking out Figueiredo unless it's like accumulation of damage like late in the rounds or something like that. But I could see Moreno submitting Figueiredo early on. It could be a possibility, right? If they, if he is depleted from the weight cut, like there's so many factors more on Figueiredo's side, I think, more than Moreno, because I think Moreno, he doesn't really have that much trouble like getting down in weight, and we've seen his style and his evolution. So I love this fight, man. I think that this is one of the most exciting fights, of the year, but I don't think we're going to see the same fight as the first fight. I think the first fight was just so great. It's like if Joanna Jędrzejczyk fought Zhang Weili again, like we're not going to see that same fight. You know what I mean? Like it's just inevitable. So if you're going to make a pick on this fight, I didn't even get your guys' picks on the first fight, but if you're going to make a pick on this fight, let's start with you, Spencer. What do you think is going to happen?
Figueiredo by smash. I really do. And I mean, part of it is just, we've seen it, right? Like all credit in the world to Brendan Moreno for the performance he put on last time around. But like I said, that fight's a draw because of a point deduction. If there's no point deduction, and I know that, playing the, well, what if, but if there's no point deduction, it's a unanimous decision win for Deiveson Figueiredo, and we're not here. And so I don't know that there are enough avenues for Brandon Moreno to improve or change things that change the dynamic of this fight and give him multiple different ways to win it. But as you said, there's so many paths to victory for Deiveson Figueiredo that I think somewhere in the first 2 rounds he gets it done.
Dylan, if there is a path to victory for Moreno, what do you think it is? What would be like if you could have two options of like, okay, this could happen or this could happen? What do you think could happen for him to actually capture this title?
Well, I think you kind of articulated a potential path to victory in the sense of like a volume-heavy TKO, perhaps later in the fight, taking advantage of a gassed-out champion should he get him to that juncture. Either something like that or maybe just like a decision-based victory, I would think. I could see those being the likeliest paths for Moreno to victory, just like really weather the storm, gas him out, maybe like just put the pace heavy on him and the ref kind of interjects himself, or just outpaces him for a decision victory. But I mean, for this one, I think I'm leaning more to Figueiredo securing the knockout. I mean, he does have a multiplicity in his game in the sense of he could rock him and then get on the ground and submit him, but I feel like it's just going to be an outright knockout for Figueiredo in this one.
And Bones Jones was saying that if Figueiredo were to lose, could you see him staying at flyweight for a trilogy? Oh man, I don't know. I think he would. I think the UFC would push for that. You know what I mean? I think the UFC they like Figueiredo. I think they like him as the champion, and Moreno would actually be a good champion too. You know what I mean? Push him as, in Mexico, especially. That's a big market. Mexicans, they love to fight. They're great fighters. We've seen the long history of competitors out of that country. So either way, the UFC benefits whoever wins this fight. And if you watch the countdown, Moreno's been doing a lot of promotion for the UFC, for Venom, for the UFC broadcast. He even moved to Las Vegas so he could take advantage of all of that. And great for him, man. Great for him, especially for if you look back at him and his track record.
Crazy.
He lost the first fight on the Ultimate Fighter and just sat through the whole season there, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
now he's in a rematch, and he got cut prior to that.
He was fighting in the UFC before his season of Tough was done airing.
Yeah,
and winning fights, winning 3 straight fights, submitting Louis Smolka.
Yeah, it's just
crazy.
The guy has had a phenomenal story, and he got cut, and he returned, and he fought for the title in one of the greatest flyweight fights ever, and now he's going to get another chance at the belt. Man, nothing but respect for Brandon Moreno, but maybe he's just catching the wrong time. You know what I mean? It's just just the wrong moment for him.
Sometimes you just run into the wrong dude.
Exactly. Now the other fight, and we're gonna probably end up finishing off with this one, is the Nate Diaz, Leon Edwards. You know what I mean? Nate Diaz,
Stockton.
Stockton, the 209 or whatever.
Yeah.
And Dylan was saying earlier in the press conference, like Nate Diaz says a couple of words and and he doesn't even have to make sense. He could say like, and then people will be like, yeah, 209 Stockton, right? Like,
yeah.
It's just the natural reaction to them.
He literally got asked that question. Like, Nate, what's it like for you to be up here and not have to say 5 words, but be the star of this? And people just started cheering Diaz, and he just pulls out the phone and starts filming them. Like, it's just a cult of celebrity, man.
He was just right in his pocket there in a lot of regards too, though. Like, he was smoking a doink on the stage
100%.
too. Getting a little THC in the system. He tried to pass it off to Moreno, but Moreno didn't opt to take a hit of the blunt, or the joint there rather. So kind of an interesting press conference in certain regards. I think I saw Jeff Nowitzki talking about that too, though, where he's like, oh yeah, whatever. I mean, you can get stoned like a couple days before or whatever. Just don't be baked the day of. It's like, oh, fair enough.
Well, maybe Moreno should have wore a Dare shirt for the press conference.
Where's Warley Alves when you need him?
Yeah, just promote that drug-free thing. But yeah, Nate Diaz, he brings eyes, and he's just become this I don't know, Conor McGregor. I don't know what people think about it, but I think Conor McGregor made Nate Diaz. Like, is it undeniable? Like, because of the Conor McGregor fight, he's who he is. It's not because he's been doing the same thing for years and years. And Nate Diaz says that, like, I've been doing the same thing for years and years. You guys just haven't noticed it. But when the Conor McGregor fight came along, that's what launched him. And good for him, man, because he's making a lot of money. He has so much stuff going on in his life. And now he gets to fight, I think, the worst matchup. And I don't even know who decided to, like, tell him, like, hey, you should fight Leon Edwards and make it a 5-round fight. I don't see a path to I can't say I don't see a path to victory for Nate Diaz, but I see that I feel like he's the biggest favorite out of the 3 fights. Leon Edwards is in this fight.
Yeah,
Spencer,
for sure.
Spencer, break it down, man. What do you see in this?
It's not that there's no paths. It's that there's one path, and it's pretty narrow, and it has to be perfect, and he has to go out there and be able to out-volume Leon Edwards for 5 rounds in a striking contest. Because, I mean, sure, Nate can catch a sub if he gets that opportunity and something presents. But I think everybody would tend to agree, and I tend to think that it needs to be 5 rounds, just put a pace on him and be able to outstrike him for 5 rounds. And I just don't see it happening. We saw Leon Edwards look great in the opening 5 minutes of that fight against Bilal Muhammad after 2 years off. Now he's had 3 months to prepare. It's a bad stylistic matchup for Nate. We've seen Nate get beat up and cut up and all of those things. Like, I think this has the potential to look as bad as that Jorge Masvidal fight did.
Yeah, that's Dylan. That's another aspect of this too, is Nate Diaz and his what you call it, like him getting cut every fight. Like, this is going to be something, because one thing about Leon Edwards is he's going to jab you. And that jab is going to be a deadly weapon. I don't care how good of a boxer Nate Diaz is. Once that Leon Edwards starts jabbing you and gets that jab working, that's going to cut you eventually, right? And this is going to become a big issue. What if the same thing happens? You know what I mean? Like, he just gets cut, and then they're like, okay, you can't continue, man. And then, oh, man, then it's just all over again, the same thing, right? Leon Edwards just can't take a break, or get a break, I mean.
Well, that's the thing with both of the brothers too. I mean, like you remember back in the day when Nick fought KJ Noons and then he got cut, and then the whole "don't be scared, homie" thing came about shortly thereafter, a classic moment in the sport's history. But I mean, Nate, it just seems like he cuts so easily. Like I saw a meme going around before I got on this call here where it was like Leon Edwards faints at Nate Diaz and he's like pouring blood from the side of his face. I don't know. It's just one of those things you come to expect from seeing him in fights. Like he's just gonna get cut. I think it's like the biochemistry of Nate Diaz coupled with his style. Like he is just so pressure heavy, unrelenting. I'm going to keep moving forward at you regardless of how I'm getting picked at, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because like Leon Edwards too has like a very well-rounded skill set. Like I feel like he can mix in the striking well, get certain grappling exchanges going on when he wants to. And yeah, just not the greatest stylistic matchup for Nate Diaz there. I mean, he's been in certain lopsided bouts, like the RDA fight, for instance. Like, I think on paper, it looks like it could be of similar caliber, like this performance with Leon Edwards taking on Nate.
When you look at Nate Diaz's track record, and maybe I'm wrong, but the last time we saw him in like an advantageous position on the ground was the Conor McGregor fight. I don't think we've seen him on the ground where he's like in like on his back, like locking up a submission. Usually when he's on his back, he like has gotten knocked down or the guy on top of him is throwing down hammers. Yeah, or he's getting wrestled. Like Nate Diaz also has kind of fallen in love with like, okay, I'm gonna just stand and box, and that's why a lot of people love him too. You know, I mean, he'll sit there and slap you like 30 times before he actually punches you, right? And it's worked out in many of the fights, but I don't think it's gonna work in this fight, man. I think Leon, he had a lot to prove in the last fight, but I think this fight is like the launching path for Leon Edwards. What do you think, Spencer? Is this the launching path for him to become like a somewhat of a superstar in North America?
It should be. I don't know that it necessarily will be because we haven't really seen a British fighter take off in that way. This is the opportunity. And I mean, look, Conor McGregor is a whole different kettle of fish because that personality and that charisma is just undeniable. And Leon isn't that guy, nor should he try to be that guy. From a talent standpoint and from a performance standpoint, if he goes out and puts it on Nate Diaz this weekend, it absolutely should be, worst case scenario, the thing that makes everybody go, yeah, that dude deserves next. He gets the title shot. Let's see what him and Kamaru Usman looks like now, because obviously they fought in the past. But it's always tough, right? Because there's not just that automatic transference in this sport. It's not an automatic, we're all here because we love Nathan Diaz. Oh, this guy beat Nathan Diaz. Now we're going to love him and now we're going to support him. That doesn't necessarily happen. But in terms of the recognition and at least the acknowledgement of who he is as a competitor, as a contender, if he puts it on Nate this weekend, it absolutely should be his moment.
With Leon, you know what I mean? Like if he goes in there and completely steamrolls Nate Diaz, like finishes him in the first round, like clean knockout or submission, like what does that do to Nate Diaz? Does his stock drop, Dylan, or is he the same? Is he going to be calling for a title shot even though he got finished?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a curious one. I feel like a guy like Nate Diaz is just like, I don't know, he could lose 50 times in a row, and I feel like there's still going to be some level of intrigue and seeing him come out and do his thing and everything like that. I mean, that was a major talking point for the BMF title fight. Like you saw a lot of like people who more look at the boxing space where they're so obsessed with the O on the other side of the record. And then you see a fight between two guys who on paper you could make the inference are journeymen if you're coming at it from the boxing mindset, but it just doesn't seem to matter as much in MMA. Like, I don't know. It's a curious thing. And I feel like Leon Edwards, should he get a victory here, I feel like he'll be positioned very favorably to get a crack at the title because there's that victory over the name value star, bit of a more bolstered presence on pay-per-view, even to like a smaller kind of degree. And also just the way they've been booking Kamaru Usman, like they're almost doing the GSP legacy minded thing of like, oh, well, he ran through all the guys and then he ran through them a second time with like the different rematches and stuff like that. Like I thought that's partly why they booked the Jorge rematch. And I could see them doing a similar dynamic whereby they booked the Leon Edwards rematch. And just, if they get the outcome with Usman emerging victorious, they're just continually reinforcing this greatest welterweight of all time narrative, cleaned out the division multiple times over sort of thing.
All right, man. Well, there we go, man. 90 minutes. We good to go. Thank you guys both for coming on. Before we head out, Dylan, tell everybody, what you got working on, where you work at, where we can find everything. Your floor is yours.
Yeah, if people want to check out what I'm doing on social media, I usually share a lot of my articles there at Dylan James Bowker on Instagram, also on Facebook. You can find me over at Twitter at Dylan Bowker. And yeah, just pumping out a lot of stuff with MMA Empire and some of the aforementioned outlets there. I've got a feature with Arjan Buller getting ready to come out in a little bit there. So yeah, a few things on the go, no doubt. Going to be dropping some Triller Media Day articles tomorrow as well. So yeah, I got a few things on the go.
Good to hear, man. Good to hear. Moving forward, Spencer, you're busy as hell all the time. So what we got going on?
Just the Twitter's the easiest place. I will promote everything that I put out at Spencer Kyte. Tomorrow will be predictions for this event from the newsletter, spencerkyte.substack.com. Sign up, subscribe, get it in your email. And then, there'll be some features tomorrow with, as I said, the Marvin Vettori piece, which I'm really proud of, which I think is a really great piece and a really good look at the challenger. And then one with the champion as well, where he's a little playful. He had some fun with it. He's up for this fight. He's interested in this one now. He's amused, as we've seen this week. So those will drop tomorrow, and then some post-fight stuff, of course, on Saturday and Sunday. But it'll all just be on Twitter.
All right. Well, everybody, you guys could follow me on on all platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, JHK MMA. You can find my work here on SCMP MMA. You can find it also on Sportskeeda, My MMA News, Fight Night Picks, and then I got a weekly show on Fanatics MMA with James Lynch, and also catch the live stream this weekend for UFC 263 with James on his YouTube page. You can find all my interviews on my YouTube page at Hyon Ko, or you just search Kumite TV and you can find it. Thank you, everybody that joined us today. If you join us on the repeat, make sure you subscribe. And I always thank my guests. They will be back in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. Great catching up with them. And peace out to everybody and enjoy the fights this